Hey, what's up, YouTube? I make so many videos, I realized, talking about what I want to bet, why you want to place certain bets, right? Why you want to follow certain betting strategies. But I've never really done a video about what types of bets I avoid. I specifically try not to bet on and avoid betting on these things because I think they're a little more complex. So long story short, the purpose of this video is to give you 5 things to not bet on. And if you don't bet on these things, right, these specific markets, stuff like that, I truly believe you are going to be a much more profitable sports bettor. So I've been betting on sports basically every single day. For the past 6 years, there's a lot of things I've learned talking to other sharp bettors, as well as just from my time. I started my career as a quantitative trader. And a lot of the trading strategies I learned, working in the trading industry on Wall Street, like a lot of the complex trading strategies, things you learn about markets, financial markets, also apply to sports betting markets. And I think they're really important. So hopefully you find this video helpful, obviously. And if you have any questions, comment them below. I like to try to make helpful sports betting content. So if you have any questions, comment them below. I'll try to answer as many as possible. So the first type of bet that I avoid is niche markets. Basically, all of my betting volume is on traditional big leagues, NBA, NFL, NHL, MLB, right? So long story short, I'm avoiding bets like this. Milwaukee Admirals, AHL is the league. I don't even know what AHL is, to be honest. You can see on DraftKings, they have Milwaukee plus 1.5 priced at minus 250. Honestly, minus 250 seems like pretty good value. If you look at Pinnacle's known to be one of the sharper books. They have this priced at minus 327, but I'm still avoiding betting on these markets. I bet on college basketball, college football, college baseball in general I avoid, college hockey, AHL, these weird soccer leagues in general I'm not betting on aside from the EPL, La Liga, the main leagues. And the reason is, if you take a random AHL game, there may only be a few $1,000s bet in total. These sports books are kind of just throwing up lines. They're baking in a lot of juice, a lot of vig, high holds. And honestly, if they're not getting a lot of betting volume, if the sports book isn't, these markets aren't very efficient. And it's really hard for books to know where to price things. So you should have a lot less confidence in your edge, right? So this is minus 250. Other books have this around minus 325. It seems like good value, but for this random AHL game, there may only be a few $1,000s, if even that, being bet on these games. So the markets aren't very liquid. They're not very active. Compared to an NBA playoff game where there's hundreds of millions of dollars being bet, there's tons of sharps running models, placing bets. These sports books are taking a ton of volume. They're very liquid markets, so it's easier to figure out what is fair value. Long story short, I only bet on main leagues, main sports. These weird niche sports, even niche markets like 6th inning run line, 3rd inning total runs, I'm not betting on them because they don't get much betting volume. It's very hard for sports books to price, and therefore you shouldn't have high confidence in your edge. And I'll give you a simple example that kind of goes back to trading, right? If someone told me, hey, I'll let you buy my Facebook stock for $600, I would do that in a heartbeat. No brainer, right? Because I know I can go to the free market. Facebook's currently trading at $643 and sell it for $43 in profit, right? Like, also the stock market, especially for major stocks like Facebook, there are millions of investors, quants, researchers, really smart people who wake up every day and all they're thinking about is Facebook overvalued or is it undervalued? And the price it's currently trading at, $643.88, is where supply and demand meet. That's fair value. So if I could buy Facebook at $600, it's a super liquid market. There's hundreds of millions, maybe millions. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot of trading volume on Facebook stock. Super liquid, right? Buying it at 600 would be a no-brainer. Selling it at 700 would be a no-brainer because I know the free market, all these really smart people, quants, trading firms, hedge funds, regular people doing research, the price where supply and demand are meeting is 643.88. That's fair, right? And if I can buy at 600, that's a great deal. If I can sell at 700, that's a great deal. However, if you think about like the price of a sports card, right, an old Babe Ruth card, it's really hard to ascribe because there's not a lot of data points. What is a collectible card worth? What is an NFT worth? All these random, artwork even, it's a lot harder to ascribe a price to. So long story short, you should be a lot more careful. And in general, I just avoid betting on these weird niche markets like the AHL, college baseball, college hockey, these leagues that don't get a ton of betting volume. So that's my first tip, is focus on main leagues, avoid the niche leagues, avoid the niche markets, right? Focus on main markets that are getting a ton of betting volume because that's where the sports books have accurate prices, they're liquid markets, yada, yada, yada. So my second tip is avoid betting into a lot of liquidity, okay? And I know this may be a little confusing. This only applies to betting exchanges. So there's a few betting exchanges in the US, NoVig, ProfitX, and SportTrade. Those are the main three. So these are peer-to-peer sites. There's no betting limits, stuff like that. So if I look here, I'll give you a simple example, is if I look here at Jalen Williams, his under 1.5 steals, it seems like pretty good value on ProfitX at -130. If you take a look at other sports books like FanDuel, they have this priced around -165, -180, whatever. Sports betting is about finding value, getting an edge. So here it's like, seems like ProfitX is offering pretty good value at -130. All these other books have this priced around -170. However, if you go to ProfitX, which says -126, they bake in a 3% commission to all winning wagers. It's a peer-to-peer site, so that's how they make money. It's kind of like the rake in poker. They just take a 3% fee out of every winning wager. You'll see that there's about $4,000 in liquidity. That's scary, right? Basically, for this weird prop market, player steals, right? It's a kind of random market. There's somebody saying, hey, I'll take the other side for $4,000. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? Somebody is trying to bet the opposite side, which is Jalen Williams over 1.5 steals for thousands of dollars. That's most likely not a recreational bettor, right? It's most likely someone smart, a syndicate, a sports betting hedge fund who's on these betting exchanges, who's trading on these betting exchanges. So long story short, if there's a ton of liquidity, especially offered on player props, I'm always very, very careful. So in general, if somebody is trying to take a big position on a betting exchange on a more niche market, this isn't a money line, a super active market, they most likely have a pretty strong opinion. Somebody clearly, if they're offering thousands of dollars on Williams to go under, they have a really strong opinion. Their model, right, if it's a syndicate, they're very confident, right, that he's more likely to go over and they're getting good value. You don't want to be betting against sharp bettors and syndicates. That is not a good strategy. You want to be betting against recreational bettors on these betting exchanges who are easier to beat, or you want to be betting on soft sports books like FanDuel, DraftKings, these sports books that are easy to beat. You don't want to be betting against syndicates. So, in general, the rule I set with myself is for player props, if there's over $1,000 in liquidity on the opposite side, I'm not taking it. I'm not taking it as an EV bet. I may still arbitrage bet, right? I may still arbitrage bet if there's an opportunity and guarantee a risk-free profit. You'll see tons of people online talking about arbitrage. ProfitX and NoVig, two peer-to-peer betting exchanges. They're amazing for arbitrage betting because they have no limits. And arbitrage, again, is simply when two books have such different odds that you can play them against each other, bet equal and opposite outcomes to guarantee a risk-free profit. But I'm not EV betting on player props into thousands and thousands of dollars of liquidity. I don't want to bet against sharps. I don't want to bet against syndicates because in general, they're pretty smart. And if someone's trying to take a big position on a random player prop, you don't really want to be taking the other side of that trade. And it was the same thing in trading, right? This was the same thing when I worked as a quantitative trader. When I worked as a trader, if we got a call and there was some hedge fund trying to take a massive position in some weird options, and we'd be very careful. We'd think about it over and over and over again before we make that trade. Because if someone's trying to buy and take a huge position in a relatively illiquid asset, some derivatives of ETFs, even certain stocks, they most likely have a very strong opinion. And those are scary people to trade against. And it's the same thing on these betting exchanges. Obviously, this doesn't mean never bet on betting exchanges. For example, here's a play I personally bet. Okay, so we have Cole under 6.5 strikeouts. Looks like it's really good value on ProfitX at plus 126. You can see there's only 38 bucks in liquidity. So it's almost certainly this isn't some sharp better or some syndicate. They're not trying to bet $38. They're trying to bet $3,800. So most likely this is a recreational bettor who just wants to be on, Cole's over. So this is a play I feel fine taking. If this said, $4,000 in liquidity, I would avoid it. I hope that makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, you can comment them below. The next thing you really want to avoid betting on is same game parlays. They're fun, right? Like, especially for the NBA playoffs, there's only one game tonight, Thunder Nuggets. It's fun to have a same game parlay on, but on FanDuel, on DraftKings, on sportsbooks that offer SGPs, same game parlays, they are baking in a lot of juice. Okay, the second you go and you make a same game parlays have the highest hold, the highest profit margin for sportsbooks. So I'll give you a simple example is for game 6 of Thunder Nuggets. Let's say I like SGA over in points, Jokic under. So over-unders, the sportsbooks set them around minus 110 odds. They're setting these over-unders to be roughly 50-50, right? So 50% to go over, 50% to go under. So the fair price, the probability of winning both bets, 50% times 50%, assuming they're not correlated, comes out to about 25%. So plus 300, if you're winning your bets 25% of the time, the fair price for that parlay would be plus 300. FanDuel's only giving me plus 211. They're baking in a ton of juice. Solely because I'm picking picks in the same game, the second you hit that same game parlay button, sportsbooks no longer follow regular parlay odds, and they bake in high hold percentages. As an example, let's say I take 2 random player props, but for different games. Right? Both over-unders, again, about minus 110 odds each, right? Sportsbooks set these over-unders to be roughly 50-50, 50% to go over, 50% to go under, right? So Jalen Williams, it's the same price, minus 113 on his over and his under, roughly a 50-50 line. So in this case, if I take picks in different games, one for the Celtics game, one for the Thunder game, here on FanDuel, you can see I'm getting plus 266 odds. So just for hitting a same game parlay, placing picks in the same game, because these sportsbooks are charging incredibly high hold percentages, incredibly high amounts of juice for basically the exact same thing, an over and an under, 2 picks that are supposed to be roughly 50-50, my parlay odds are going from plus 266 for different games for a regular parlay to plus 211 for a same game parlay. Right? So be very careful with FanDuel same game parlays. I mean, sometimes the hold percentage is up to 50%. And this doesn't just apply to FanDuel. I'm not trying to pick on FanDuel. DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars, all these books that offer same game parlays, because they're not following traditional parlay odds, they're not a regular parlay, there's some correlation factored into same game parlays. Sportsbooks use that as a reason to bake in extra hold and basically rip you off. right? Plus 211 is absolutely horrible here. It's a horrible bet, and these sportsbooks are charging an arm and a leg for same game parlays in terms of how much juice they're charging. So unless there's a promo like a profit boost or something, I never even consider placing a same game parlay. They're horrible. There's so much juice baked into them. You don't want to bet on them. You do not want to bet on them. I could give you countless examples of how much juice that they're baking into the SGPs, but honestly, it's not even worth it. The next thing I wanted to say is avoid wide markets. And I know that can be a little complicated, but I'll give you an example. Is here, you can see for this soccer game, EPL, so it's not like a super niche league. Obviously, the EPL is very popular. These markets are super wide, right? Like FanDuel definitely seems like they're offering good value at plus 890. But just look how wide these markets are. I mean, DraftKings is plus 600, minus 2,500. So that's 1,900 cents of juice, right? That's a very wide market. And there's some specific reasons for that. But basically, it's kind of hard to know when the markets are this wide, what is a good price, right? Like, it's kind of like if someone says, hey, your home is worth between $500,000 and $1.5 million. It's like, okay, that wasn't super helpful, because if someone comes and tries to buy my home for $1 million, am I getting a good deal or a bad deal? You gave me such a wide range for what my house could be worth. So $500,000 to $1.5 million, it's like, if someone tries to buy my house for $1.1 million, is that a good deal or a bad deal? Whereas if someone says, hey, your house is worth between $725K and $770K, and someone comes to you and says, hey, I'll buy your house for $1 million, it's like, well, that's a no-brainer, right? You told me the highest price that it could be priced at is $770K. I have someone offering $1 million. That's a no-brainer deal. That's a no-brainer trade. So it's the same thing here. When the markets are wide, it's a lot harder to know what's fair, right? The same math, the general math of devigging markets, you can apply. But in this specific example, it's like, okay, plus 890 on FanDuel, is that good? Is that not good? What about plus 840? What about plus 900, plus 1,000? These markets are so wide that unless I'm getting like, plus 2,000 odds or something like that, it's really hard to know that you're getting a profitable bet, because the markets, again, are just so wide. There's so much juice. These spreads are so wide. Compare that to an NBA money line. I'll give you an example. Nuggets Thunder tonight. This is NoVig, a peer-to-peer betting exchange. These peer-to-peer betting sites, sportsbooks have monopolies essentially on their odds. They set their odds. They have no reason to offer good prices to bettors. On betting exchanges, it's peer-to-peer, so the best price wins. So the markets in general are much tighter, much more competitive. So you can see on NoVig, the Nuggets are plus 178, the Thunder are minus 182. That's 4 cents of juice, right? We were just talking about how, the previous market on DraftKings, there was over 1,000 cents of juice. It's really hard to ascribe what is fair value, what is a good bet. Whereas here, we kind of know the market is plus 178 Nuggets, minus 182 Thunder. If I could get the Nuggets at plus 200, that's an amazing price, right? These markets are super tight. The Thunder are offered at minus 182. So if you could get the Nuggets plus 200, that's arbitrage. By definition, one of those bets would have to be profitable, right? It's pretty clear that, hey, Nuggets at plus 200 is a good deal because these markets are so tight. Same thing with if you could get the Thunder at minus 150, that's a no-brainer. Nuggets plus 200 would be a no-brainer bet, right? The market where millions of dollars is being bet. This is an NBA playoff game, super liquid. Millions of dollars are being bet on this game on each sports book, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars probably total. So if you could get the Nuggets at plus 200 in a very tight liquid market, that's a no-brainer. If you get the Thunder at minus 150 in a super tight liquid market, that's also a no-brainer. So try to focus on markets that aren't super wide. And typically as the odds increase, as you get more into tail outcomes, like a dude to hit 2+ home runs or a hockey player to score 2+ goals, right? As these markets become more uncertain, more tail outcomes, like long shot bets, it's a lot harder to ascribe fair value. So these books have much wider markets. That's the whole point. So try to focus on markets that are tight, low market width, low market width. And in this case, obviously a 4-cent spread on the Thunder Nuggets game is crazy because we know, okay, like somewhere around -180 Thunder, the Thunder are favored, about -180, the Nuggets are underdogs, about +180. We know roughly exactly what the price is. According to the free market, you know, there's hundreds of millions of dollars being bet on this NBA game, on this money line. We know what's fair at this current time. Obviously, if someone gets injured, if Jokic gets injured, that's going to change massively. But given all the information we have, sportsbook odds are real-time market data. It's based on all available information. We know that Nuggets +200 would be a no-brainer bet. Because again, you could just arbitrage bet it, hedge against NoVig, guarantee a profit. At the same time, we know Thunder -150 would be a great bet. And we know this because the markets are so tight for these mainline markets on major sports. The final type of bet you want to avoid is payout shift slips on PrizePicks, Bettor, these DFS platforms. So DFS sites like PrizePicks are pretty exploitable because they have fixed payouts. So like, for example, on Betr Picks, which is a pretty popular DFS site, I made like $68,000, something like that last year. So these DFS pick'em platforms are very, 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 very exploitable. You can make money on them, but you got to be careful, right, with payout shifts. Because some people will try to get creative, and I'll give you a simple example here. So this is what I mean by they have fixed payouts. You know, if I make a 2-pick entry on PrizePicks, it doesn't matter if I take a guy to go over or under, I'm gonna get a 3x payout regardless. PrizePicks gives you the same payout if you take a player to go over or under. There's no odds, it's just 2-pick entries or a 3x payout. However, if you try to get clever and say, okay, well, why don't I stack, let's say Jacob deGrom, Rangers pitcher, to go over in strikeouts. If he has a good game, all the Astros players are more likely to go under. So I'm just going to correlate this. Take deGrom over in Ks, all these Astros hitters under in fantasy score. That seems like a great slip, right? If deGrom goes over, if I'm getting the same payout, if I take his over as under, I want to pair his over with Astros hitters under. But what you're going to notice is PrizePicks, they have a crazy payout shift. They usually give you a 20x payout on 5-pick entries. Usually, they give you a 20x payout on 5-pick entries. Because of the correlation, they're adding in a payout shift, reducing that down to 8x, which is horrible, right? All the value of the correlation is completely wiped out because they are drastically reducing your payout from 20x. That's what they're supposed to give you. PrizePicks is supposed to give you a 20x payout, right, on 5-pick entries. They're reducing it to 8x. So in general, if slips have payout shifts, again, the more time you spend on PrizePicks, you can kind of learn how to avoid payout shifts and still exploit positive correlation. But if PrizePicks is adding in a crazy payout shift, in general, just avoid it because PrizePicks is adding in a huge payout shift that it's not even worth thinking about the correlation you were going to try to exploit. In general, not always the case, but if PrizePicks adds in a payout shift, I think it's a good general rule of thumb. If there's a payout shift, don't play it. Regardless, I hope you found this video helpful, useful. Again, drop any questions, future video ideas. I love making content about sports betting. And yeah, thanks so much for your time. 5 types of bets you should avoid.